Aiden sat alone in his room aboard the starship Kindred, watching the stars slowly drift past the window. The hum of the ship was soft, almost comforting, but his heart felt heavy. He stared at the small blue music cube Lysera had given him months ago. It used to glow brightly when touched, playing melodies from her world. Now it was silent. Just like her, she had changed. Lysera, the alien diplomat from Valen, once smiled with her whole soul. Her eyes used to light up whenever Aiden walked into the room. They had shared quiet dinners, deep talks, and long walks in the garden dome. But now she barely looked at him. Her words were shorter. Her warmth was missing. He missed her. Aiden ran his fingers through his dark hair, frustration building. He didn't understand where things had gone wrong. He always tried to be kind, patient, and open. It was like she had built a wall he couldn't break through. Was it something he said, or something she felt but couldn't explain? He looked at the cube again, gently tapping it. For a moment, a faint tune played soft, echoing, and sad. Then silence returned. Far away, in her own quarters, Lysera sat in silence too. She stared at her hands, long and graceful, but trembling slightly. Her heart ached, though she didn't fully understand why. Human emotions were strange, deep, loud, confusing, and Aiden's feelings were the strongest of all. She had never met anyone so open, so full of warmth. At first, she loved that about him, but over time, she started doubting herself. She didn't know how to be what he needed. She didn't know how to share herself in the same way. Her people, the Valari, were trained to hide emotion, to control every feeling. Crying was seen as weakness. Asking for help? Unthinkable. So she stayed quiet, thinking silence was better than showing her confusion. But Aiden read that silence as rejection, as distance. And now he was slipping away. That night they passed each other in the hallway. Aiden gave her a soft nod. She nodded back, but neither stopped. The silence was louder than any scream. After he turned the corner, Lysera stopped walking. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I don't want to lose him." In the command center, Captain Relin had noticed the shift in their bond. She had always admired how the human and the Veilari found something special between them. But now the light in their eyes was fading. She sighed. Some things, she thought, even the stars cannot fix. Back in his room, Aiden packed a small bag. He had requested a temporary leave to Earth. Maybe space wasn't the right place for love after all. Maybe some hearts just couldn't beat in sync, no matter how hard they tried. He placed the music cube in his bag last. It flickered once, then quiet again. He stood, walked toward the door, and paused. Part of him hoped she would stop him. Call his name, anything. But the hallway remained still, and so, without a word, he walked toward the docking beach, step heavier than the last, but far behind him. Lysera had made a decision. Her heart was pounding. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to say it, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let him go. Not like this. Not without a fight. Lysera stood alone in the hallway, her eyes fixed on the path Aiden had taken. The quiet ship around her seemed colder, emptier. She had let him go again. And again, she had said nothing. Her heart was heavy, and her chest ached with a feeling she didn't fully understand. Love, she thought, should not be this hard. She walked back to her room, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Every corner reminded her of Aiden. His smile, his laugh, the way he always asked how her day was, even when he was tired. She missed those moments more than she ever thought possible. She sat down on her bed and opened the small memory crystal hidden in her drawer. It glowed gently and played a recording one of the first nights they spent together. Aiden's voice filled the room. No, on Earth, we used to look at the stars and wonder if anyone else was out there. Now I sit next to you and I feel like I've found the whole universe. Lysera covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Back then, she hadn't known how to respond. She smiled at his words, but she didn't say anything. Not because she didn't feel anything, but because she felt too much and didn't know how to share it. She realized now how silent she had been. She remembered all the times he reached for her hand, and she gently pulled away not to reject him, but because she didn't know if her feelings were too big, too different, too alien. She thought silence would protect their bond. Instead, it broke it. Across the ship, Aiden walked slowly to the docking bay. He should have felt relief he had made his choice, but instead, he felt empty, as if he had left a part of himself behind. He stopped for a moment and pulled the music cube from his bag. It had been her first gift. The melody inside was strange, but beautiful, just like her. He placed it on a nearby ledge and tapped it. Nothing. He tried again. A soft, broken note played, and another, then silence. Aiden smiled sadly. "Just like us," he whispered. He turned to leave, but something made him pause. He remembered the way Lysira looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. There was love in her eyes, he was sure of it, so why did she never say it? In her room, Lysira opened her communication console. Her fingers hovered above the message keys. She wanted to write to him to explain everything. But what could she say? That she was afraid of being vulnerable, that she didn't know how to. Show love the human way? Would that even matter now? She took a breath and began typing. "Aiden, I know I've been silent. I know I've hurt you. I didn't mean to. I just didn't know how to say what I feel. I was raised to hide my emotions, but you made me feel everything. And I didn't know how to handle it. Sorry. Please don't leave. Not yet." She stared at the words, then erased them. She didn't send the message. Instead, she stood up and made her way toward the docking bay. Her heart pounding faster with every step. Maybe she couldn't write the perfect message. Maybe she couldn't explain it all. But maybe, just maybe, if she looked him in the eyes, he would understand. Maybe words weren't always needed. Sometimes just being there was enough. The corridor lights dimmed gently as the ship prepared for night cycle, but Lysira didn't sleep. She sat on the floor near her window, looking out into the stars. Her fingers traced circles on the cold metal floor while her mind replayed the last few days over and over. She wanted to cry, but her tears wouldn't come. Her people were trained to hold their emotions tightly like secrets. But this one was breaking out. She had nearly told Aiden everything, but nearly wasn't enough. Sira stood up, pulled out a small silver box from her drawer, and opened it. Inside was a piece of paper, very old, very delicate. Aiden had given it to her when their relationship had first begun. It was a handwritten note. "No matter how far we are, I'll always listen. Just talk to me. I'm not perfect, but I want to understand you." She had smiled at it once, but now it made her chest ache. In his room, Aiden sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the message draft he had written, but never sent. His mind kept returning to her eyes, so calm, but hiding something deep. Inside, he wondered if she had ever truly felt what he felt. Or had she just been trying to make peace between species? Was he just a symbol of diplomacy to her? Didn't want to believe that. Their first real connection had happened under the stardome. Were alone, surrounded by holographic constellations. Of Earth and Valen, sharing quiet stories. Aiden had talked about losing his brother, about the ache that never went away. Lysira had listened not with words, but with soft eyes and the warmth of her silence. He felt safe that night, like someone truly understood. But after that, she pulled away. He never knew why. Lysira walked slowly to the quiet garden dome. It was her favorite place on the ship. No noise, just stillness. She sat beside a small pond and looked at her reflection. Noble diplomat everyone respected. She saw someone afraid, someone unsure. She whispered to the water. He showed me everything. His fears, his hopes. I gave him silence. That's not love. She touched her chest and finally felt the emotion rise sharp. Real, human-like. I do love him, she said aloud. And with those words, she began to change. She stood and walked back to her room with a new kind of energy in her step. She opened her console again and began recording. Not a message this time, but her heart. You once said you'd listen, because I never told you how deeply you've touched my life. I was afraid of being too much, or not enough. But what you gave me, it was beautiful. I see that now, and if you let me, I'll try to give it back." She paused, her breath shaky, and ended the recording. But again, she hesitated to send it, not because she doubted her feelings this time, but because something inside her said no message could carry what her voice, her eyes, her presence could. Say, she had to go to him right now. She stepped out into the hallway, heart racing, feet moving fast. No more silence, no more almost. This time, she would speak with her soul. The docking bay was quiet. The heavy doors stood open, showing the shuttle that would take Aiden away from Kindred. His bag was over his shoulder, but his steps were slow. Deep down, he didn't want to go. He just didn't know what else to do. He had waited. He had tried. But now, all he had was silence. As he reached the shuttle's ramp, a voice echoed behind him, soft but shaking. "Aiden." He stopped. His heart froze. He turned slowly. Lysira stood there, breathless, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She had run all the way from her room, and her chest rose and fell as she tried to speak. She started, but the words caught in her throat. Aiden stared at her, unsure. Hope flickered in his chest, but he kept his face calm. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "I understand." But Lysira shook her head. "No, that's the problem. You don't. Because I never let you." She stepped closer, her voice trembling, but her eyes clear. "I didn't talk. I didn't show you what I felt. And I know it hurt you." Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time she didn't hide them. "I was afraid," she whispered. "On my planet, emotions are private, love is quiet, but you gave me everything. Oh, you loved me in the open. You reached out even when I turned away." Aiden's eyes softened. He wanted to speak, but she lifted her hand gently. "Let me finish," she said, voice shaking. "I made you feel alone, and now you're leaving because of me." She took a breath, then stepped closer, standing right in front of him now, choked with emotion. She said, "I promise to change, don't walk away. I love you so much." Her voice cracked on the last words. They were raw, honest, and full of every feeling she had held inside for so long. Aiden's bag slipped from his shoulder. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, and then quietly he reached out and touched her hand. "You really mean that?" he asked. Lysira nodded, barely holding back more tears. "I do. I didn't know how to love the way you needed, but I want to learn. I want to try. With you." A long silence followed, but this time it was warm. Aiden gave a small, tired smile. "I never wanted to leave, Lysira. I just thought you already had." She shook her head, stepping into his arms. "I was still here. I was just scared." He held her close, feeling her warmth for the first time in weeks. And this time, she didn't pull away. They stood like that for a long moment, at hearts beating in quiet rhythm. The shuttle door stayed open. But Aiden never walked inside. He had been looking for a reason to stay. Now he had one. After that night in the docking bay, Aiden and Lysira did not return to the same distance that had grown between them. Instead, something new began, a fragile, delicate bridge made from words and quiet moments. Neither of them expected it to be easy. Love was never simple, especially between two worlds. In the garden dome, they sat side by side on a bench surrounded by glowing plants and soft light. The air smelled faintly of wildflowers, and the hum of the ship seemed gentler here. Aiden watched Lysira carefully. He knew she was trying her best to understand him, just as he was trying to understand her. She reached out, hesitated, then took his hand in hers. It was a small gesture, but to both it meant the world. "I want to tell you about Earth," Aiden said softly. "About the things that made me who I am." Lysira nodded. "And I want to share Velen's stories too." He smiled, feeling warmth bloom inside him. For years he had thought love was simple, like the songs his mother used to sing, but with Lysira, it was something new. It was messy, beautiful, full of questions and mistakes, but also full of hope. She looked at him, her eyes bright. "I was afraid I had to be perfect," she said. "That if I showed weakness, you would leave. You're not perfect. Aiden said, squeezing her hand. Neither am I, but that's okay. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be honest. Lysira smiled, tears sparkling like stars in her eyes. Honest. That's something I'm learning. Days passed, and slowly they rebuilt what had broken. Lysira learned to speak more openly about her feelings, even if it was uncomfortable. Aiden listened patiently, without judgment, his heart open. One evening, Lysira showed Aiden a small glowing orb from her homeworld. This is a memory light, she explained. It holds the moments we want to keep forever. She handed it to him. Inside, a soft light flickered, showing their first meeting on the kindred, their smiles, their laughter. Aiden looked at the orb and then at Lysira. I'll keep this with me always, he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Me too. Knew the path ahead wouldn't be without challenges. There were still cultural differences, fears, and moments of doubt. But they also knew they were stronger together. That night, under the glowing stars of the garden dome, they made a silent promise, not just to each other, but to the love they had found in the vastness of space. No matter what came next, they would face it side by side. Days turned into weeks aboard the Kindred, and Lysira worked quietly but steadily on the promise she had made that night. Change was not sudden or easy. It was made up of small moments, tiny steps forward, and occasional slips backward. But she kept moving. Each morning, Lysira woke earlier than usual. She practiced speaking her feelings out loud, sometimes in front of the mirror. I am scared, she would say softly, or I love you, even when Aiden was not nearby to hear. These words, once foreign and difficult, began to feel real. Aiden noticed the change not just in what she said, but in how she looked at him. There was a softness in her gaze, a willingness to be vulnerable that he hadn't seen before. Filled him with hope and a quiet joy. One afternoon, they sat together in the ship's common room, sharing a meal that combined flavors from Earth and Valen. Lysira reached across the table and took Aiden's hand. Tell me, she said, when do you feel most alone? Aiden thought for a moment. When I'm afraid to say what's on my mind, he answered. When I hold back because I worry, I'll be misunderstood. Lysira nodded slowly. That is how I have lived my whole life. But I want to change. For us, he smiled. You already have. Sometimes they stumbled. Lysira's old habits of silence would return, or Aiden's. Frustration would bubble up. But they no longer ran away from these moments. Instead, they talked through them, learning patience and kindness. One evening, Lysira surprised Aiden with a gift, a small, hand-carved pendant from her home. It was shaped like a star, and she told him it symbolized hope and new beginnings. Aiden accepted it with tears in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. I will wear this always. Their bond grew stronger not because everything was perfect, but because they chose each other every day, despite the flaws and fears. The crew of the Kindred watched quietly. The human and Veilari, who once seemed so different now, moved together like two halves of a whole. Their love became a beacon. A quiet but powerful story of courage and change. Lysira leaned her head on Aiden's shoulder one night, whispering, Thank you for believing in me. Aiden kissed her hair gently. Thank you for staying. In the vast, endless space, two hearts learned that love was not about never falling, but about rising together again and again. The stars outside the Kindred sparkled like tiny diamonds scattered across the endless blackness. Inside, the ship hummed softly, a steady rhythm that matched the quiet peace settling between Aiden and Lysira. Their journey had not been easy, but it had led them here together. Aiden stood by the window, looking out at the vast galaxy. He felt a calm he hadn't known in weeks. Beside him, Lysira wrapped her arm around his waist, resting her head gently on his shoulder. I never wanted to leave, he said softly. I was scared that we couldn't find a way back to each other. Lysira smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. And I was scared I wasn't enough, that my silence would push you away forever. He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. You're more than enough. You taught me that love isn't about being perfect. About being real. They stood close, feeling the steady beat of their hearts. Aiden thought about the night he almost left. How her words had stopped him, the promise, the love, the hope. He remembered how fragile and strong she was at the same time. We're different, he said. From different worlds, with different ways. But somehow we found a way to make this work. Lysera nodded. Because we chose to stay. Even when it was hard. A soft chime sounded the signal for the peace summit that had brought them together. But their lives had changed beyond politics and duty. It found something deeper. Aiden smiled and whispered, "Let's face whatever comes next. Together." Lysera squeezed his hands. Together. In that moment, in the quiet hum of the ship and the endless stars beyond, two souls connected not just by duty or chance, but by love that had grown through struggle and hope. Aiden looked into Lysera's eyes and knew that no matter where the galaxy took them, he would stay. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to, because love was worth the fight. And so, in the cold vastness of space, where distances were measured in light years, two hearts had found home in each other. The impossible had happened. He stayed, and she loved him more every day.